Fill the jars. Spirit of God, look on your recreation. Shaped for our task and our purpose in life, help us respond to this invitation. Fill the jars right to the brim and draw some out now, pressed down, overflowing, the work of the Spirit breathing within. Vessel of clay, we hold gifts in all frailness. Easily shattered, we're often afraid. Let's celebrate your strength in our weakness. Fill the jars right to the brim. To receive you in my deep yearning essence, constantly pouring out what we've received, always renewed in your peaceful presence. Right to the brim, fill the jars. If in our life there's growing fulfillment, changing of water into rich wine, it is the Spirit in love's our movement. Fill the jars right to the brim.
We are in arguably the most famous part of the gospel. We're in John, Gospel of John, chapter 3, verses 14 to 21. This is Jesus, Creator sets free the chosen one, speaking with one of the religious leaders of the time, a man by the name of Nicodemus. Jesus asked Nicodemus this question: "Don't you remember when Moses lifted up the pole with the snake on it in the desert wilderness? This is what's going to happen to me, the true human being. So people will put their trust in him, have the life of the world to come that never fades away, a life full of beauty, full of harmony. The Great Spirit loves this world of human beings. He loves it so deeply that he gave us his Son, the only Son who fully represents him. All who trust in him and his way will never come to a bad end, but will have the life of the world to come that never fades away and is full of beauty and harmony. Don't forget the Creator did not send his Son to decide against the people of this world, but to set them free from the worthless ways of this world. The ones who trust in him are released from their guilt, but the ones who turn away from him to follow the ways of this world, sadly their guilt remains. This is because they are turning away from the life of beauty. They are turning away from a life of harmony. And this is the gift that the Great Spirit has offered through his Son. And this is what decides for or against us. My light has shined into this dark world, but because of their worthless ways, people prefer and actually love the dark path more than the light one. When they choose the dark path, they do not want others to see either. And so they hide in the darkness and grow to hate the light. But the ones who are true, the ones who do what is right, the ones who try to walk in the daylight so that others can clearly see, know this: they are walking with their Creator. We have been in this Lenten season talking about calamities, and we must at some point acknowledge the fact that some calamities are brought upon us by each other. Even more painful, we must acknowledge the fact that sometimes we are the calamity in another person's life. Sometimes they misinterpret our words or our actions, but other times, and maybe one of the great gifts of getting older, is the moment, though it does not feel good, it is important, when we can look ourselves in the mirror and go, yeah, I'm the villain in this one. I chose a different path, and harm has happened. This is why love is vulnerable, because it comes with risk. We can hurt those whom we love. We can be hurt by those whom we love. And that is a fact of life. We've all experienced that. We will continue to live with it. But this is not what we're talking about today. Today we're talking about those sinister, those diabolical, those people placed in our lives that bring about as much joy to us as a pebble in a shoe. Our enemies. People who actually are maybe out to get us. People who maybe do not think too highly of us and will take that opinion of us that they have and share it with anyone who will listen and cause us no end of grief, dismay, and hurt feelings. We need to talk about enemies because if you've lived any kind of life, you're going to get a few. And that is important. Now, you will also be enemies to somebody else, but that we're going to leave for another time. Because enemies are a surprising and weird possible gift from God. Don't worry, I'm not going to make this too hoity-toity, but I do hope to share a few things. And it comes from this beautiful, famous passage of Jesus talking to Nicodemus. Nicodemus, of course, is a religious leader. And religious leaders for all time are very invested in dichotomies. Specifically, who is following the rituals well, who is not. What the problems are often become who are the problems. For the people of Jesus' time, it could be the Samaritans, it was the Romans, it was those Jewish people who were not following the laws of Moses accurately. They were considered on par with their ancestors who wandered in the desert, griped against God to such an extent that God sent poisonous snakes among them to inflict them with venom and death until they, in faith, looked at a statue of a snake. Now, Jesus, and the Gospel of John will, of course, use this as a powerful explanation from the Jewish tradition of how the crucifixion works. That the venom of sin that dooms us to death will be healed through no action, no medicine of our own, just believing and looking to the cross that is behind me. So thank you, Stella, for having me light the cross up today. It's incredibly theologically important. And that's a part of it. Now, if that was the only part of it, the moment you believed, the moment you would look on that thing, you would be saved and disappear into glory, into this land of deep, rich harmony. But no, sadly, and for some of us, we have to spend decades trying to follow this good path, and it's frustrating, and enemies frustrate us. The good news is Jesus always offers this third way. There's one way to handle things, there's another way to handle things, but the unique genius of Jesus is he offers us these third ways. We know famously that he says when somebody strikes you in the cheek, turn the other cheek. Now, that has been often translated as basically a spiritual blessing to become a doormat without understanding the context of what Jesus was doing. So this is just one example. When somebody struck you on the cheek, they would do this. It's a backhand, right across the face, okay? It's a sign not only of physical harm, but of disrespect. You're literally getting the back of the hand. When Jesus, not telling his people to be a doormat, says, turn the other cheek, and know what happens. This forces the person, this may not seem like a great one, but it's important, to hit you this way, to hit you like an equal. This was the radical social upheaval that Jesus was offering. You don't respond with violence in kind, but nor do you back down. You force your aggressor into an uncomfortable paradigm for themselves, into treating you like an equal. You'll take the hit again. You're going to get hit twice. But the second time, they're an equal. We're overthrowing this. The Roman army could force somebody to walk their gear a mile when they were traveling through. You've heard, you have to walk a mile. I say walk 2. Then that second mile is your decision. The added bonus is a Roman soldier could actually get in trouble for making somebody walk more than a mile, and all of a sudden the power dynamic shifts again. The Roman soldier goes from you there, carry this for a mile. You take it. The mile is up, you're supposed to give the gear back and move on your way. That helps the Roman soldiers move farther. But you say, no, I'm good, I'll keep going. Either that's gonna be fine, but now again, the decision is yours. Or the Roman soldier's like, no, give it back. If he has a really strict sergeant or something like that. And again, the power dynamic is shifted. From you carry this for a mile to give it back. These were the creative ways Jesus found to overturn the corrupt and overwhelming power dynamics without succumbing to the violence that was at the back of these things. The violence that gave strength to these things. And so what do we do with enemies? There is a scholar of myths by the name of Joseph Campbell. I'm a big fan of Joseph Campbell's. He's one of those rare academics who was able to communicate ideas to large audiences that were very profound, but also very easy to understand. And behind most of Joseph Campbell's research was he looked at the myths and the religious stories of cultures all around the world. Cultures that had never met each other, had no awareness that the other one existed, and started to notice a lot of them had very similar themes. The stories were different, but similar themes. All ancient societies talk of a great flood. That's interesting. Many of them have their spiritual hero, in order to become the spiritual hero, begins with 3 temptations. Noticing all these these are really interesting ideas, especially from people that were separated by thousands of years and hundreds of thousands of kilometers. Is that possible? How big is our planet? That's possible, right? We'll say tens of thousands of kilometers, people that didn't know each other. And one of the ideas he came up with, and this is what I will end with, was that in all of our lives, we will encounter three different types of people, three groupings of people. He put the journey of life in just that form, like a journey, like a myth, like a Lord of the Rings or that sort of stuff, a quest. Life is a quest to figure out meaning, to find out where it is that what it is you are supposed to do. It's like, this is a big quest. And as Jesus points out to Nicodemus, there are those who fall and go on a wrong path. There's high stakes in this. I really want us all to make sure that as we're living and breathing, we recognize our lives have high stakes. Our decisions matter. But we're not called to make these decisions alone. We're called to make these decisions with other people. And these are the three people we'll encounter. The first, he calls the wizard, the guide, the mage. This is a person that has your best interests in mind, but maybe won't necessarily go with you. This can be anybody from a formative teacher to people in your life who give you wise advice, who say, this is what I see about you, and offer you an option or an idea of what path you should take, even if they won't walk the path with you. Which brings us to the second group, the friends or companions. These are the people that will walk with you on the journey. This is your group, this is your tribe, this is the people that support you, that know you, that love you, that when you fall will pick you up, will walk on the journey together because your paths are the same or similar. You are all walking together in a journey. Now, of course, as we know, friends sometimes come and go. Many of them will be with us for decades. Some might only be with us for a year, but they will be our friends. They will walk beside us. Which brings us to the third, the enemy, the foe. And to Joseph Campbell and to Jesus as well, these two have a very, arguably most important idea. Because part of the quest is figuring out for yourself who in your life is the wizard or the mage, who in your life is the friend or companion, and who in your life is the enemy and the foe. And the enemy is tricky, because sometimes the enemy tells you what path you should take. And if you think this person is a friend, you may end up on that path. But that path will lead to ruin. And do you see where I'm going with this? As we gain wisdom, as we gain insight, as we learn who our true friends are, those who are actually invested in us, we start to see that the enemy is not that invested in who we are. This is somebody putting their own ideas upon us. This is someone who has a whole bunch of motivations that don't center us. This is not a companion. This is an enemy. And sometimes that recognition can be painful, but I encourage us all to step one step further. Because the enemy, more than the mage, more than the wizard, more than the friend, can be incredibly helpful. Because if you recognize that someone does not have your best interest at heart, whether it's through their own selfishness or genuinely not wanting good things to happen for you, ask for their advice and do the opposite. The enemy is actually the clearest voice of which path you should take. If you have two paths in front of you and your enemy says, take this one, you know that's the path to ruin. Because your friends will be like, I'll walk with you. They may not know the path, but they're willing to sacrifice themselves and go with you. They're willing to be with you because they love you. The enemy will never. The enemy will try to trick you. And once you can name and recognize a person as such, so helpful. Whatever you say, I'll do the opposite, and I'll know I'll be on the right path. So when Jesus says, you've heard it said this, but I say this, one of the most powerful ones was to pray for your enemies, those who even persecute you, because that is close to the character of God, and this is true. But also, and I hope you recognize this, thank God for those you recognize as foes to you, because they, whether they mean to or not, get to speak as the voice of God to you by telling you exactly where not to go, and through their own selfishness, exactly where to go. And so we wrap up with the old ancient story of Joseph and his brothers, and Joseph has that great line, The brothers that were all jealous of him tossed him in a ditch. He ends up in Egypt and comes to unbelievable prominence. And then his brothers come back to Egypt, not thinking their brother has been long dead, because Egypt has stored up all this food, and everywhere else is a great famine. And the brothers come to them. They don't recognize their little brother, and he decides to play with them a bit, but ultimately save the entire family. And the older brothers, for obvious reasons, are broken down, consumed with guilt. And Joseph has this great line, which I want us all to carry with us. What you intended and what you did was meant for harm and evil, but our God turned it to good. These are some of the practical, powerful ways in which this faith really can help us day to day. Not with some important but esoteric theological reason why, but in the wisdom to see who is for me, who is against me, and recognize that thanks to our God, both of them can bless us. Okay? Good. Amen, amen. Amen.